The human brain processes spiritual experiences differently than any other emotion, triggering neural pathways that scientists still can't fully explain. When someone encounters what they perceive as divine, the prefrontal cortex actually reduces activity, while the temporal lobe increases, creating a sensation of stepping outside oneself. Have you ever wondered what happens when an actor realizes they're speaking words that billions believe came directly from God's mouth? What would you feel if suddenly, in the middle of performing, you became overwhelmed by the weight of representing the most sacred figure in human history? The answers lie in understanding that true spiritual encounters don't follow scripts or schedules. When Jonathan stepped onto that dusty set in Texas during March 2019, cameras rolling for the Sermon on the Mount sequence, something unexpected happened. If you enjoy content that helps you grow spiritually, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and join our community for more inspiration. Let's get started. The 45-year-old actor had prepared extensively, studying Matthew chapters 5 through 7 with theological consultants and spending weeks in prayer. Yet nothing could have prepared him for that moment when the words, "Blessed are the poor in spirit," left his lips. Standing before 200 extras portraying first-century crowds, Jonathan suddenly felt displaced from his own body. The sensation wasn't gradual, it struck like lightning. One moment he was Jonathan Roumie, seasoned performer with 20 years of television experience. The next, he was a vessel speaking sacred text that had transformed civilizations for 2 millennia. "Cut!" he called out, stunning director Dallas Jenkins mid-scene. The production crew of 47 people watched as their Jesus walked away from the cameras, removing his prayer shawl with trembling hands. The panic wasn't physical fear. It was spiritual overwhelm. Every syllable felt like borrowing authority he didn't possess. Jenkins approached cautiously. Jonathan's face had drained of color, his breathing shallow and rapid. "I can't do this," the actor whispered, gesturing toward the mock hillside where hundreds waited. "These aren't my words. They belong to the holiest being who ever walked this earth." The weight of inadequacy pressed down like desert stones. Jonathan had portrayed various characters throughout his career. Terrorists in Homeland, wise guys in Law and Order, but nothing compared to this moment. He wasn't just acting, he was channeling something infinitely beyond himself. As John 12:49 reminds us, even Christ acknowledged speaking not from his own authority, but from the Father who sent him. That realization would become Jonathan's lifeline through the storm ahead. 3 weeks later, the production moved to Utah's desert locations for the most spiritually significant episodes of Season 4. Jonathan arrived at the sprawling film compound on September 14th, 2019, knowing these next 14 days would test every fiber of his faith. The Last Supper scenes demanded an intimacy with Christ's final hours that no actor had ever attempted on this scale. Jonathan's experience reveals that spiritual warfare isn't reserved for biblical times. It's happening right now, in Hollywood studios and boardrooms, in churches and homes, wherever God's truth threatens the enemy's territory. This is exactly what The Secret of Jesus' Apparitions offers, a path to clarity and peace through his revelations. This ebook goes into his prophecies and offers insight into what lies ahead. It's available for free in the pinned comment. Grab it now before the edition's gone. Father Michael Rodriguez, Jonathan's spiritual director from Chicago, flew in specifically for these sessions. The priest understood that portraying Jesus washing the disciples' feet and breaking bread for the last time required more than acting. It demanded spiritual armor. They spent the first evening in prayer, but nothing could have prepared them for what began the following morning. Jonathan settled into the makeup chair at 4:30 a.m., his usual routine before transforming into first-century Palestine's most controversial figure. The prosthetic team worked methodically, applying the familiar beard and weathered skin texture that had become recognizable to 280 million viewers worldwide. But as the final touches were applied, something shifted dramatically. Sharp, stabbing pains shot through Jonathan's left ear canal, so intense they brought tears to his eyes. The sensation wasn't gradual onset. It struck like electrical currents, causing him to grip the chair's armrests until his knuckles whitened. The makeup artist, Sarah Chen, stepped back, concerned, as Jonathan's breathing became labored. "This isn't normal anxiety," he texted Father Rodriguez, who was reading morning prayers in the adjacent trailer. The priest immediately abandoned his breviary and began reciting the rosary, focusing specifically on the sorrowful mysteries. Within 15 minutes, the excruciating pain vanished completely, leaving Jonathan bewildered but determined to continue. The attacks escalated throughout that first week. Heart palpitations struck during the foot-washing rehearsal, causing Jonathan to pause mid-scene as his pulse raced beyond 120 beats per minute. Waves of dizziness overwhelmed him during the bread-breaking sequence, forcing multiple retakes. Each time, Father Rodriguez's prayers provided immediate relief, creating a pattern too consistent to dismiss as coincidence. By day 9, the entire cast noticed the spiritual heaviness surrounding their Jesus. Actress Elizabeth Tabish, who portrayed Mary Magdalene, later described feeling an oppressive atmosphere whenever Jonathan prepared for his most sacred dialogue. The wardrobe department reported unexplained equipment malfunctions, specifically during costume fittings for the Passover meal scenes. Dallas Jenkins privately consulted with the production's theological advisors, wondering if they should postpone filming. The spiritual warfare wasn't subtle. It was aggressive, targeted, and intensifying as they approached the crucifixion sequences scheduled for the following season. The pattern became unmistakable during the Garden of Gethsemane filming on October the 2nd. As Jonathan knelt among the ancient olive trees recreated on the Utah set, preparing to deliver Christ's agonizing prayer before his arrest, the opposition intensified beyond physical symptoms. Equipment failures plagued the production in ways that defied technical explanation. Camera operator Marcus Williams had serviced his Red Epic camera just days earlier, yet it mysteriously lost power 3 times during Jonathan's most emotionally vulnerable moments. Sound engineer Rebecca Torres discovered inexplicable interference in her audio feeds, static that appeared only when Jonathan spoke the words, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me." The interference vanished completely during other actors' dialogue. What disturbed the crew most wasn't the technical chaos, but the timing. These disruptions occurred precisely when Jonathan portrayed Christ's deepest moments of human vulnerability and divine authority. During lighter scenes, Jesus laughing with children or sharing meals, the equipment functioned flawlessly. The correlation was too deliberate to ignore. Production assistant James Mitchell later confided to his wife that he'd never experienced such concentrated heaviness on any film set during his 15-year career. "It felt like something was actively pushing back against what we were creating," he explained. 3 different crew members reported strange dreams featuring dark figures attempting to prevent them from completing their work. If you're experiencing your own spiritual battles like Jonathan did, remember that understanding these encounters can transform how you face them. Download your copy from the pinned comment while supplies last. Only a few copies remain available. The spiritual resistance followed a biblical pattern that Father Rodriguez recognized from Scripture. just as Satan tempted Christ directly before his public ministry began in Luke 4. The attacks on Jonathan intensified before filming scenes that would eventually reach hundreds of millions of souls. The enemy understood that authentic portrayals of Christ's love and sacrifice posed a genuine threat to his dominion. Dr. Sarah Beckham, a theologian consulting on the series, noted that throughout Christian history, Satan's opposition escalated whenever God's truth was about to break through to massive audiences. The printing of Bibles, the Great Awakening revivals, and Billy Graham's crusades all faced similar spiritual warfare. The difference with The Chosen was its unprecedented global reach through streaming technology. Jonathan found himself caught in the crossfire of an ancient battle. His physical body became the battlefield where light confronted darkness, just as Christ had experienced during his earthly ministry. The ear pains, heart palpitations, and overwhelming anxiety weren't random occurrences. They were calculated attacks designed to derail a project that was already transforming lives across 6 continents. Between takes, Jonathan would retreat to his trailer, falling to his knees in desperate prayer. The weight wasn't just about portraying Jesus accurately, it was about standing firm against forces that didn't want this story told with such powerful authenticity. Each scene became a spiritual victory won through suffering, just as Christ's own ministry had unfolded. Father Rodriguez arrived at Jonathan's trailer on October 5th, carrying nothing but a thermos of holy water and unwavering conviction. "We're approaching this wrong," he announced, settling into the cramped space that had become their war room. Christ himself showed us the path, 40 days of fasting before confronting Satan directly. Jonathan's decision came without hesitation. Starting immediately, he would consume only water until filming concluded, breaking his fast solely for the Eucharist during morning Mass. The priest had arranged for daily celebration of the liturgy in a converted equipment trailer, transforming the industrial space into sacred ground with portable altar stones and flickering votive candles. The change was immediate and visible. Within 72 hours, Jonathan's entire demeanor shifted. His movements became more deliberate, his voice carried deeper resonance, and his eyes held an intensity that unsettled even veteran crew members. Script supervisor Linda Hayes noted that Jonathan rarely needed direction anymore. He seemed to intuitively understand each scene's emotional core. The fasting created an unexpected side effect that amazed the production team. Jonathan's portrayal of Jesus became exponentially more powerful. During the bread-breaking scene on October 8th, actress Paris Patel, who played Matthew, later described feeling genuinely moved to tears by Jonathan's delivery of "Take and eat, this is my body." The authenticity was undeniable. Prayer became Jonathan's primary focus between takes. He would disappear into the makeshift chapel, spending 30-minute intervals in silent adoration while the crew reset equipment. Father Rodriguez observed that these prayer sessions seemed to build spiritual momentum, creating a protective atmosphere that the earlier attacks couldn't penetrate. The biblical foundation for this approach was crystal clear. In Matthew 17:21, Jesus explicitly told his disciples that certain spiritual battles required fasting combined with prayer. Jonathan was literally following Christ's prescription for confronting demonic opposition, and the results spoke for themselves. His story of overcoming spiritual warfare through faith mirrors struggles many believers face today. Don't miss this opportunity to gain proper insight. Grab your free ebook from the first comment before they're all claimed. By October 12th, the oppressive heaviness that had plagued the set completely lifted. Camera operator Marcus Williams reported that his equipment functioned flawlessly, sound engineer Rebecca Torres recorded pristine audio, and the entire production moved with supernatural smoothness. The combination of fasting and prayer had created what spiritual directors call breakthrough, a decisive victory over forces that had been hindering God's work. Jonathan's sacrifice was transforming not just his own performance, but the entire spiritual atmosphere surrounding the most important story ever told. Dallas Jenkins watched from behind the monitors as Jonathan delivered his most challenging dialogue yet, Christ's final instructions to his disciples before the arrest. Something had shifted dramatically in the actor's performance over the past week, but Jenkins couldn't pinpoint exactly what until this moment on October 14th. "Jonathan, can we talk?" Jenkins called out during a lighting adjustment. The two men walked to a quiet corner of the set, away from the bustling crew preparing for the night shoot. Jenkins had directed hundreds of actors throughout his career, but he'd never witnessed such a profound transformation in someone's work. "I have to ask," Jenkins began carefully, "how are you handling all this? The weight of playing Jesus, the spiritual attacks, everything we've been through?" Jonathan's response would become one of the most honest conversations about worthiness and calling ever recorded. "Dallas, I wake up every morning feeling completely inadequate," Jonathan admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every single word I speak as Jesus feels like borrowing something that doesn't belong to me. The panic attacks, the physical symptoms, they're real because this role is exposing every area where I fall short." Jenkins placed his hand on Jonathan's shoulder, the gesture conveying understanding that words couldn't express. "Brother, none of us are truly worthy of what God calls us to do. But here we are anyway. You and me, this entire production. We're here because He chose to use broken vessels to tell the most perfect story." The director's words echoed 2 Corinthians 12:9, where Paul discovered that God's power reaches full strength through human weakness. Jonathan had been fighting his inadequacy instead of surrendering to it. The realization was liberating. His weakness wasn't disqualifying him from the role, it was qualifying him for God's strength. "We're not doing this so the world can see how talented we are," Jenkins continued. "We're doing this so people who've never heard Jesus' story can encounter His love. Those who already know Him can see Him with fresh eyes. Your struggle with worthiness is actually proof that you understand the magnitude of what we're portraying." Jonathan felt something shift internally, a release from the crushing pressure to be perfect. He didn't need to be worthy enough to play Jesus. He needed to be humble enough to let Jesus be seen through him. The distinction changed everything about his approach to the remaining scenes. That evening's filming captured some of the most powerful footage in the series' history. Jonathan's portrayal carried new vulnerability and strength simultaneously. The paradox of someone who had discovered that admitting weakness opens the door for divine power to flow through. The same spiritual principles that helped Jonathan triumph during filming can guide you through your own challenges. Secure your free ebook now from the pinned comment below. We're down to the final copies available. The final day of filming arrived on October 18th with an atmosphere nobody expected. Instead of the oppressive heaviness that had plagued previous weeks, the set hummed with anticipation and inexplicable peace. Jonathan emerged from his morning prayers with Father Rodriguez carrying himself differently, not with the burden of unworthiness, but with the confidence of someone who had learned to trust God's strength through his own frailty. As cameras rolled for the climactic betrayal scene in Gethsemane, something remarkable occurred. The spiritual attacks that had tormented Jonathan for weeks transformed into confirmations. Each moment of resistance he'd endured had been preparing him for this victory, not just personal triumph, but breakthrough for millions who would eventually watch these scenes. The crew noticed it first. Lighting technician Maria Santos later described feeling an unusual warmth despite the cool October evening. Sound mixer David Park recorded audio so pristine it required no post-production enhancement. Even the typically skeptical camera operators found themselves moved by Jonathan's performance in ways that transcended professional admiration. Jonathan understood now why the opposition had been so fierce. The Chosen wasn't just entertainment, it was spiritual warfare disguised as television. Every episode that reached global audiences represented territory reclaimed from darkness. The enemy's desperate attempts to derail production confirmed the project's eternal significance. By November 2019, early footage began circulating among Christian leaders worldwide. Pastor Rick Warren called it the most authentic portrayal of Christ ever filmed. Catholic Archbishop José Gomez praised its theological accuracy. Jewish scholars commended its historical authenticity. The series was bridging denominational and cultural divides in unprecedented ways. If these insights resonate with you, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Your super thanks support helps us create more content like this. Join our community and stay connected. Jonathan's suffering had purchased something invaluable: credibility. His willingness to endure spiritual attack while portraying Christ gave the series an authenticity that polished performances could never achieve. Viewers sensed they were witnessing someone who had genuinely wrestled with the weight of representing Jesus and emerged transformed. The attacks ceased completely after filming wrapped, but their purpose had been fulfilled. Jonathan Roumie had been refined through fire, emerging not as someone worthy to play Jesus, but as someone humble enough to let Jesus be seen through him. The difference would impact hundreds of millions of lives across every continent.